Does position matter? Is miscarriage your fault? And how about stress and fertility? There are so many myths surrounding fertility, and I loved connecting with colleague and friend Lisa Schuman on this week's episode to clarify some of these common myths. We not only bust the myths, but we review the why and the rationale surrounding these questions while we explain the answer. Welcome to the Baby or Bust Fertility Podcast, the podcast with interviews and in-depth discussions on reproductive health created to support anyone curious about infertility, miscarriage, and early pregnancy. I'm your host, Dr. Lora Shahine, a double board-certified OBGYN and reproductive endocrinologist and former fertility and IVF patient myself, helping build families for almost 20 years and dedicated to supporting and educating you on your family building journey. In today's episode, I help bust 5 myths that my friend Lisa Schuman asks me. Lisa is a licensed therapist with over 30 years experience helping families navigate their own fertility journeys. She's an author, a podcast host, and the founding director of the Center for Family Building, a center for support, guidance, and education for all types of families. Today, Lisa asks the questions she and I both hear from patients every day, and I answer each one at a time, and I discuss where these assumptions come from and what the true answer is. Let's get started.
Today, I'm partnering with Dr. Lora Shahine. She has so many amazing credentials. She is a fertility doctor. She had her fellowship at Stanford University Hospital. She is partner at Pacific Northwest Fertility Center. She's got so many amazing credentials. But most importantly, she is an amazing person. And as you will see on this podcast, and you can certainly see her on social media as well, she is compassionate and she is kind and she is so thoughtful. She is so well known in so many circles. And I met her a couple of years ago at ASRM. She's an amazing physician, an amazing role model for everyone out there. So I'm so grateful to have her today.
Oh my gosh, Lisa, that was just a beautiful introduction. I'm blushing. I appreciate that so much. I am so happy to connect with you again. And I very much appreciate what you are doing for this community and really do direct my patients, especially to your podcast. So thank you very much.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Well, we're both here to try to help people. And I'm so grateful to have you here. And I think we can try to bust some fertility myths today. There's so many things that we both get asked about. Is this true or is that not true? And Dr. Shahine and I both agree that there's so much confusing information on the internet, and it's so hard to be stuck in the middle of fertility treatment. And then on top of that, you get this confusing information and sometimes, sadly, misdirected about where to go and what to do. So we are going to bust some myths today. Should we get started, Dr. Shahine?
Absolutely. I'm excited.
Okay. All right. So, fertility myth number 1, positions matter. People wonder if you are in the right position, are you going to be more likely to get pregnant? And if you're in a situation where you're having, let's say, an IUI, should you lift your hips up? Is that going to help? People like to throw their legs in the ceiling. So, are any of those things going to help you get pregnant?
Well, the short answer is no, but I do want to validate just how frustrating it can be to be trying and it not happening. And then you think to yourself, okay, what could I do differently to improve my chances? You know, we're taught in middle school that we should be worried about getting pregnant because it's so easy. And then when we're actually ready to start our family and we're planning and it's not happening, you think to yourself, maybe it could be position. Maybe I could, lift my hips up, or I could make a difference somehow. So I never want to, make people feel silly for asking questions like this. Like, this is a real question, but the answer is no. The sperm is in the fallopian tubes and it's on its way through the reproductive tract within seconds after intercourse, and is okay to relax a little bit. It's okay to lift your hips up. But honestly, like some of the things that people do, like, for a half hour, or, sometimes people will, try to keep stuff that comes out in the vagina for a long time. And then they're only increasing the risk of a urinary tract infection. So
Wow.
there's actually some downside. It's actually can be beneficial to kind of relax a little bit, but then get up and, go to the bathroom, urinate, and go on about your day. You do not have to keep your, hips up. I tell people after an embryo transfer, right? Like that's very precious. You want to do everything that you can. Honestly, the data shows that people who get up and kind of go to the bathroom right away have actually a little bit of a higher success rate in randomized controlled trials. It's not statistically significant, but rather than what I was taught in fellowship at Stanford, which was, this is back in the dark ages. Okay. They don't do this anymore, but we used to have patients lie flat for about half an hour, even give them bedpans because we didn't want them to get up.
I had that.
Oh, I see.
I was one of those.
Well, we were all just trying to do our best. We're in this with you, and we want just to improve the chances, but we know it really doesn't matter. And I tell my patients, I'm like, if it mattered, I would hang you upside down after an IUI. I would, hang you upside down after an embryo transfer, but it really doesn't matter. So such a good question. And I'm really happy to bust that myth.
Well, thank you. And on that note, what I also hear a lot about is what about the sex of the baby? If I have sex in a different position, am I more likely to get a girl or a boy? Is there any truth to that?
No, but it's okay to understand where this comes from. Okay, so the sex of an embryo comes from the sperm. All eggs are X chromosome. And so if the sperm is an X chromosome, that baby will be XX or a girl. And if the Y chromosome comes from the sperm, the embryo will be XY and that'll be a boy. And the X chromosome is shorter. It's actually less genetic material. Now we can joke about brains and capabilities of men versus women if you want to, but we're talking about science, and the X chromosome is larger than the Y chromosome. And so the theory is that sperm with a Y chromosome has less genetic material. So therefore it should be able to swim faster. Okay. So people think, oh, if I'm in a position where ejaculation can happen really close to the cervix and get into the reproductive tract faster, then maybe it'll be a boy because the Y chromosome might be able to swim faster. So I get that theory, but it just doesn't pan out. So the answer to the myth is position does not impact the sex of the embryo.
Okay. Well, thank you for telling us. That's really good to know.
I hope it's okay that I'm going into like where these come from because
great.
I just don't want to be like flippant about it. People are like, well, but my friend did it in this position and had a boy and that's what she wanted. And so it worked for that person. So it's got to be, there's got to be something to it. And it's like, well, but for that person, there's 5 other people that did the exact same thing and,
didn't work.
It wasn't the same outcome. So, you just want to kind of know where it comes from and just be thoughtful about it.
Right. Now, this is a sad one. Miscarriage is a woman's fault. Women, as you know, often feel, even if they don't say it out loud, it's my fault. I did something, I got up too fast. I'm so nervous every time I go to the bathroom because I thought I stepped off the curb too hard, or I'm sure you've heard all of these things. I shouldn't have exercised. I shouldn't have done this. Maybe I ate some deli meat or whatever. And somehow I've caused this.
I hear it every single day. We are our own biggest targets, and if we don't have an answer for something, we're going to blame ourselves. But it is not the woman's fault. Miscarriage is no one's fault. Just because we think it doesn't make it true. I say that a lot in my practice. But also, this comes from a lot of history, right? Everything that's been family building, everything has got to be the woman's fault, the woman's responsibility. I mean, how many wives did King Henry, kill because he couldn't have a boy, even though we know that sperm causes the sex of the embryo, right? And so if you can't get pregnant, it's got to be the woman's fault. If you can't have a boy or girl, it's got to be the woman's fault. If you have a miscarriage, it's got to be the woman's fault. So that comes from a lot of history and misunderstanding and sort of not understanding science. And then also it's almost like a soothing technique for women because the most common cause of miscarriage is absolutely something genetic within the embryo, a chromosome imbalance, or even if the chromosomes come out normal, there are still so many genes on every chromosome that it can still be a genetic issue, even though science can't test for it yet. I really believe it's an embryo issue in the vast majority of the time. But when you don't have an answer, if you can find something to blame in yourself, then it's something that you can change and build up the courage to try again so that you could maybe have some impact to not have this grief again. So it makes sense to say, oh, it must be the gluten that I ate. It must be the glass of wine that I had. Or, sometimes the male partner's like, oh, we had sex. And then the next day we had a miscarriage. It must be, because we had intercourse, right? And that's not true either. But then if you have this, something you can blame, you can change that intervention the next time you're pregnant and hopefully not have a miscarriage. And so it's a coping technique. But the problem with that is that you still could have another miscarriage. And then you're starting this spiral of like self-blame and shame. And, oh, well, I wasn't careful enough with the gluten in my diet. Got to look for something else to blame and change later. So it's really, I don't want to shame anyone for feeling that way. It's really common. It's really normal. You feel broken. You're assuming that the embryo is perfect because it's a child that you imagined and it was beautiful in your future, but it is not your fault. Miscarriage is no one's fault.
And sometimes, right, nature doesn't necessarily want to keep a pregnancy where there's a chromosomal abnormality anyway, right? Where it's our bodies functioning sometimes correctly.
Exactly. And it's hard to hear that. And a lot of people aren't ready to receive that. But I do talk about that it is in a way, it is your body working and realizing that this wasn't going to be a healthy pregnancy, no matter how much we desire it. And your body is helping you be able to resolve that pregnancy and try again, even though it's really hard, really, really hard.
And while we're on that, I think one thing that people need to also think about, and I'm sure you get this a lot, is stress. People say, just like they blame themselves for the deli meat or whatever, they blame themselves for feeling too stressed, right? And what is the medical proof there?
Oh my gosh, absolutely. This is really tough because it's kind of the chicken or the egg. I had a great discussion with Dr. Ali Domar from Boston IVF and Harvard Medical School, who's done so much research into mind-body connection and stress and fertility, written lots of books. I had her on my podcast in season 1. It's such a good episode. And she talks about the chicken or the egg, just going through infertility treatments or struggling to have your family can be very stressful in and of itself. And so what came first? Was it the stress and the fertility? Was it the fertility issues and the stress? And it's hard to nail it down because everybody perceives stress so differently. There are people that can have children in the middle of war and famine. And there's other people that can be truly having high cortisol levels and very high stress levels. And it could be impacting their hormonal axis, and it can throw off ovulation and throw off some of the supporting hormones that support a pregnancy. But you can't ever prove and say, oh, stress caused that miscarriage or stress is causing your fertility. I think that we can all work on stress management tools. I talk to my patients about working on whatever it is, bringing joy into your life, mindfulness, therapy, coloring books, reading, time out, vacations, whatever it takes to find joy and manage stress. Because if I have 2 patients that are at a bus stop, and they both go out into the street and almost get hit by a bus, the person who has worked on breathing and recovery techniques and calming mechanisms or has a fidget in their pocket is going to recover from that intense cortisol push faster than the person that's never worked on techniques. So we all can work on techniques. Ali and I are actually working really closely. It's pretty new. We're still working on the studies on a device. It's called Otto device, OTO,
Oh,
where we're actually getting some feedback on neural parameters in fertility patients and giving them advice on ways to decrease the autonomic response to a lot of the stressful events,
hmm.
seeing that recovery. And we're hoping that that feedback will help people learn how to manage their stress, not just be told, oh, just relax, right? Or just go on vacation and it'll happen. Not just telling everybody to go to therapy. Like sometimes that's, access to care is an issue and all that kind of stuff. But giving some feedback and recognizing that it is really important is key. And then we stress about stressing.
Yes, right.
It's a
There's
circle,
more stress, right?
Yeah,
Yes. So
exactly.
hard.
We are going to get back to the myths with Lisa in just a second, but I want to take a moment to remind you just how important it is to review the show. So take time wherever you're listening to this podcast to give us a review. 5 stars would be amazing. And I want to share one with you that we got this week that really just made me smile. I've been loving this podcast as an OBGYN who faced many years of infertility. It sounds like I'm writing this review, but this is from Alyssa, Fibroids and Fertility. Thank you for this review, Alyssa. An OBGYN who faced many years of infertility and has walked that line between patient and provider. I really resonate with how Dr. Shahine handles these topics. Compassion, care, true stories, relatable experiences, expert insights. It really has it all. Wow, Alyssa. Thank you so much for that review. Now let's get back to the show.
The next question has to do with something that's so important, I think, for a lot of people, but particularly people who are using ovum donation. And they very often understand the ways in which the placenta contributes to the pregnancy, but they don't very often understand the role of epigenetics. So I thought maybe you could talk a little bit about that, because I think it does make people feel a little bit better knowing that they're not just the oven.
Yeah, absolutely. When I'm talking to my patients about thinking about third-party reproduction, whether it's like, I think one of the most common things that we think of is a woman who might be using donor egg. And that woman, like you said, they feel just like an oven or just sort of gestating. And sometimes even people have talked to me about like, I feel uncomfortable because someone else's egg was fertilized with my partner's sperm and I'm sort of carrying it. Like all of those emotions are real and normal. And it's good to be able to talk about those things. But I talk to my recipients, like the intended parents, like, oh my goodness, no, you carrying that pregnancy, you have so much influence over what genes get turned on and turned off. And epigenetics is sort of everything that surrounds the genetic code. All these genes are on these, big stacks of Legos and carried on our chromosome, but it's a very small percentage of the actual genetic content that gets expressed. You can have genes for brown eyes, but still have blue eyes. You can have genes that are for short stature and tall stature, and you can be kind of right in the middle or at the extremes. And it's the things that are surrounding the DNA, the epigenetics surrounding genetics, that can really turn on and off certain genes. And so for years, recipient moms have been at the playground and people say, oh my gosh, your child, has your eyes or has your mannerisms or has your this or your that. And they kind of have felt like, oh gosh, now it's not my egg, it's not my genetics, but absolutely there's a lot there. And I just think we're still learning a lot. I mean, think about how much genetics is shared. You can do cell-free fetal DNA testing from maternal blood. So in the first trimester, you can get a vial of mom's blood and find fetal DNA in order to screen for chromosomal
It's
issues.
amazing.
Well, so there's so much interaction and crossover. And I really tell people you are not just a gestational tool. It is an incredible process and it's sharing. And we're still really just learning the significance of epigenetics.
Yeah.
Do you talk to people about that when you're chatting with people that you're, counseling and talking to?
Sure. I very often talk about, the placenta being kind of the bricks and mortar, even though the architecture is the genes. And so you're kind of still building the flesh and blood and contributing to that. But the epigenetics I kind of see as this menu. Yes, you only have the donor's father's eye color and the mother's nose shape and the grandfather's musical talent and all of those things, plus your partners or the genetic contributors. And those are the only choices you can choose from. But the person who's carrying gets to pick what they want off the menu. So they get to pick, okay, yes, I'm going to, not deliberately, although some people would like to do that. They get to pick, yes, I'd like this person's musical talent or their left-handedness or their long earlobes or whatever it is. And so, yes, you only get to choose from those groups of genetics, but you do get to choose. And so the baby is uniquely yours and could not be the same if an embryo was in somebody else's body. It would be completely different. So I tell patients that you have every right when your child is mean to you as a teenager to tell them that you built them and they have to be nice to you. So
I like that menu analogy a lot, Lisa. I think that's pretty neat because I talk about genetics and like stacks of Legos and like not everything is expressed, but I think that's a little bit, kind of nerdy, scientific. I like the menu and that you're able to choose different things off the menu and your body is choosing some of these different things. I like that. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome.
Yeah.
There are probably a million questions I can ask you, but those were the 5 that I came with tonight that people most frequently ask me.
Those are such good questions. And I get them every day in my practice as well, or on Instagram or TikTok. And yep, it's really common. I'm glad we were able to address them.
And it's so nice that you respond to people. I was just saying to Dr. Shahine before we came on that actually today, somebody told me how wonderful it was that she was sharing all of this information in such a warm and caring way. And it really helped this person that I was speaking to today through her darkest hours. So I really appreciate you being out there as well.
Oh man, I really appreciate it. I struggled to have my family, and I think it's a pretty unique situation to be a fertility doctor with infertility. It was actually really quite frustrating.
Sure.
I was like, I should be able to fix this. It was really quite humbling. And so my patients that are really struggling with like, why is this not happening? And I want to have like the diet or the detox or the way to control this. I can really relate to that because we're really taught that we're in so much control of everything that happens in life, right? That's a very like kind of American value. You work hard enough, you will get into that college that you want to, or you'll get that job that you want to. You're in control of your destiny. Fertility comes along and it just knocks you on your feet. It's just incredibly humbling. And so I think just trying to get that message out there has just been a true joy. It's a creative outlet. It's kind of fun, but it's also just, I think, kind of something that I really wish was out there when I was going through it, honestly. And just like listening to what you're doing and helping people on your podcast and your outreach is so valuable. It's such an incredibly lonely place to be. And it's nice to hear other people that have been through it. I hope you enjoyed this discussion with my friend Lisa. It is so important to realize that not everything you read on the internet is true. Not everything that you hear from friends and colleagues is true. There's so many misconceptions when it comes to fertility, and I loved answering each and every one today, and I hope you learned something. Find this episode and all others at my website, drlorashahine.com, and on my YouTube channel. I love educating, so you can find me, like I said, on YouTube, Instagram, TikTok. Share your own fertility story and topics that you'd like to learn about. You can send us an email at hello@drlorashahine.com. Thank you to our friends at Seattle Sperm Bank and Braze Run Production for sponsoring the show. Thank you to my producer, Shannon Perry, and her team at Audiotocracy. This is your host, Dr. Lora Shahine. See you next week. And until then, wishing you love, luck, and pineapples.